Should have just recorded last night.
I know. And we're back. It is COMP2007, and it's the summer 2016 semester, and it's week 4, part 2 of our broadcast. We just installed the entity framework, and now we want to try and use it. So let's, I'm going to shut some of these things down. I just wanted to show you the model. This is the class that we're going to be using. Again, student ID, last name, first mid name, and enrollment date, which is a date type. That's what those ones I want to use. And I want to pull up my students site. We're going to build 2 sites, this one, and we're going to build out a student's details in a second. Let's build this one first. All right, so we want to use this ASP.NET grid. It's a grid layout. Let me pull out my papers now. I'm pulling out my papers, right? Because it's lots of work to do down this one, right? And again, we're going to get it from this toolbox typically. This is what we would normally do. Now, you'd be forgiven to think you can drag and drop your grid view. It's not going to work. You know, the grid view, any dragging and dropping in Entity Framework 6 is not supported in our current model. Why? Web forms applications are slowly becoming phased out, and they're continuing to support web forms, but you know, there's certain things, certain features that are not compatible. One of them is this drag and dropping stuff. All right, so what we want to do is we want to say ASP : and we want to do a grid view. We're going to do a grid view, and we press tab. What it does is it creates our basic grid view. We have a run-at server with a closing tag. And what we want to also do is talk about an ID. I want to set the ID for the grid view to students grid view, right? Because that makes sense. Students grid view ID. Right now we have the run-at, the ID, right, for the students. And really, that's it in a nutshell. We don't have much of anything else that's in here, and that's all we need, right? For where the data is going to come into. This is where the data is coming in, right? However, we need to connect it on the back end, right? So we're going to save this, and we're going to go to the back end now, and we're going to add it in. So to see the back end, I'm going to go View again, Code, which is F7. And you're going to see the back end. And what I want to do here is do a couple things. We want to make sure that if, here's some comments here, if you're loading the page for the first time, then you know what? Populate the student grid, right? If you're not, then don't do that. Don't go on, if you just update the page, don't repopulate everything, right? Only populate this thing if you're coming there from the first time, like you're actually going there from another site, another link, right? So we're going to say if not is post back, right? That's the command to do that. And we're going to say, well, you know what? Let's get the student data. That's what we're going to do here. Okay, well, we're going to get the student data with a method. We're going to create another separate method for that, right? So we're going to kind of go up here, and we're going to create a new method, protected, void. And inside there, we're going to say get students. There we go. And in this method, what we're going to do here is we're going to say something like this. We want to be able to connect with this method to the entity framework. But in order for us to do that, we're missing a couple things. In fact, we're missing a couple of using statements up at the top. Let's do this. So I'm going to kind of add in some comments that says these using statements that are required, right, required to connect to EF database, right? Here they are, using, and we want to put in the name of our project. So in yours might be something different. Mine's COMP2007, summer 2016, blah, right? And .models, because we want to look at that models folder. That's the first thing we want to do. That's the first using. And the second one is using, and then system.web, right? .model binding is what we want to use. Those two. Model binding allows us to bind to the data model, right? Okay, once we have those two using statements, we can do connections to the entity framework, right? So we're going to do down here. I know that I'm going to call, first of all, the get students method from inside of my is postback, so I might as well put it in there now. I'm going to use the this keyword, this.getStudents. You don't have to use it. I like to use it because it tells me which method I'm using. I'm using the method that belongs to this class, all right? Just a convention. Okay, so in here, what I want to do here is eventually I'll do some documentation. I'm just going to kind of scaffold it out for now. We can kind of put the documentation in here later. Remember, for documentation best practices for C#, what we want to do is two things. One, we can start putting documentation here, but I want to use something called a summary for me to get code hinting. Inside my summary, I can add a little bit of some description of what this thing is about. So this method gets the student data from the database. But it does, right? Very simple. And what does it take? Well, the method, it's at method. We're going to use the name getStudents, right? And at returns, is void. This kind of comment style, I mean, again, is the comment style that I recommend. And again, you can look at UEDoc for syntax. We talked about that one time. All right, so again, I've commented my method. And what I want to do here is I want to go in there and start having my, I want to do a connection with resources. If you've done any kind of Java before, it's like this. It looks almost very similar. I'm going to say using a default connection. Remember, this is a context. I want to make a new object called DB for database, right? And I want to make a new, here's my new object, default connection, right? So I use my default connection to make a new database object. And then I want to put two curly braces underneath that. And this inside here is the context that I'm going to do all my connection to the database right here. All right, so let's do that. How do I do it? Well, I want to query the students, right, table using Entity Framework and link. Link is a syntax that makes query language very simple, right? And we'll talk about that a little later on. We're also going to use something new. Normally, when we do C#, we do stuff like this. We say the name of the data type, and then we mention the variable, and then we assign it, or something like that. But we're going to use var, right, in C#. And when you look at var, you're like, hold on, isn't that a JavaScript thing? Well, actually, var is being used in C#. It's also used in Swift and other languages. And what it does is it says, hey, here's a variable, and we're going to call this thing students, right? We're going to assign it. We're going to use the open brace here for a second, right? So open parentheses. And we're going to say from, there's the link, right? That we're going to use. And then we're going to make a new variable. I'm going to call this thing all students. You can call it whatever you want. From all students in my database students table, right? I want to select, right, all students. I'm going to look at all students and select them all. From all the students, select them all. From star, select star, right? That's what it's really doing, right? Now, why the var? Because take a look. If I hover over this thing, the code hinting says it's an iQueryable with a type of student. So we typically use var because I want to do something called implicit data typing, right? And we do that a lot in more modern languages. Why? It's like the idea of duck typing. You know, if it walks like a duck and sounds like a duck, it's a duck, right? So if you assign something, the compiler takes a look at what you're assigning on the right side of the assignment statement and it says, what is this? Oh, well, it's some kind of query, right? Well, if it's a query, this must be an iQueryable, right? That's what it does. It's almost like if I'm assigning a variable like 0 or 1, you know it's some kind of integer, right? 0, you don't know actually, but 1, definitely. If it's just a 1, it's an integer, right? Probably going to default to integer 32, right? And an example of that would be if I had some kind of weird integer. I'm just going to do this as an example. So var my int, right? My int, right, is equal to 1, right? What would that be? And if I hover over that, you're going to see that, well, you know what? It's an integer, right? It detects that it's an integer because I'm assigning an integer to it, right? I'm not going to need this right now. I'm just using that as an example. All right, so that's the first thing we want to do is query the database. Now students, this object has the data in list form of all the students that are in the database in the students table. That's what it does. So in list form, it's actually a collection. It holds a collection of students inside my students variable. I want you to think of that, right? Okay, now we're going to bind the result, right, to the grid view. We're going to use grid views a lot in this course. We can use grid views, layered grid views that are, multiple grid views on one screen, all kinds of stuff. Like, for example, when you do your assignment number or project number 1, you may choose to use a number of grid views to display the data, right? Okay, we're going to say, guess what? Our student grid view, this is the student grid view, dot data source, we're going to specify the data source, right, is equal to what? Well, it's going to be our students dot to list. We're going to convert our students that we got our collection to a list, and we're going to assign the list, the resulting list, to this as a data source. Then the grid view is going to take that data, parse it, and put it in tables and rows, or rows and columns, right? Now, one more thing we have to do is students grid view. Oh, I hate that. Grid view dot data bind. What data bind does is it creates this one-way data binding, right? Not two-way data binding. Two-way data binding from Angular, any kind of time you have a change to the database, it's almost like there's a watch going on between the website's live and the database, and you get a live feed. It's not like that here, right? It's still stateless, so you only get a one-way data binding. So it sends information when you refresh the database, right? If you didn't have this data bind, you could refresh it all you want. It'll only spit it out one time, right? So that's why you do the data bind thing. All right, so this is it. As long as we've done this, let me just save this. We should have a connection now. This is the backend file, the code behind file, to the front end, right? All we have is one line, this little grid view, and it should show us a table of students. Is it going to be pretty? Hell no, right? We're going to fix that with Bootstrap, right? Let's take a look at that. All right, here we go. So it's coming up. And you can see that if we did everything properly, you're going to lead a little table like this. Actually, this is all the data, right, from the database. So I'm getting the data from the database, and I'm displaying it here inside my students page, right? Notice that now also the students page has an active link, and all the other courses, all the pages will work too. If I click on courses or departments, I can click on them. Contact still works. Go to home again, and I can even go to students, and it'll display this little list again. So I like it, but there's a couple of problems. One is it's all scrunched up, right? You can see that the last name and the first mid name and the enrollment name, there's like so much, we just smashed this thing together and put it up on here, like for bare bones. I mean, I don't even know why they would do such a thing with no styling whatsoever. So let's fix this. And one thing we need to do is we need to break this apart a little bit. So even though we can do this with one line, and if I really want to, by the way, I can go in here. Notice that there's a little smart arrow here, the smart arrow. I can go in here, and when I click on the smart button here, it'll actually pull up this little grid view thing, and I can auto-format it like this. And you can say, well, you know what, I want a colorful format or classic. And this is like the old way of doing forms. Like this form, choose snowy pine. I like snowy pine. Or, I want black and blue one, So it's kind of weird, right? But you could do it this way and apply the styling, right? But this would be all inline styling, and it would be pretty crazy. We don't want that. We definitely don't want that. In fact, if anything, we don't want auto generation at all. So if I go auto generate columns, we want to set this to false. When we set this to false now, we can break the grid apart. So we can do one of these, right? And what we want to do here is we want to do a couple of things that make this a little bit more dynamic, right? We're going to make some changes here. So one, we want to add a columns tag. The columns tag will allow us, right, to add different columns inside of our application, of our little grid, right? So we can define each of the columns as a field that belongs to the database. Okay, that's one thing. The next piece is, maybe add some kind of, I don't know, like an H1 tag that's kind of says something like, student list. There's a student list. A list of students, student list, whatever you want to call it. Right? Student list. That's one thing. And I also want to kind of take this and kind of, I don't know, format it properly inside some more div tags and everything else that works for Bootstrap. So let's do that. So we'll say Bootstrap needs a container. So we'll put in the container. Inside the container, we're going to have another row. Inside the row, we're going to have another class that's column, medium, offset. We'll make it, I don't know, an offset of 2, and column dash medium dash 8. So we'll have 8 columns for the actual data, 2 columns to the left for some kind of margin, and 2 columns to the right. So everything's centered. All right, inside here, we're going to chop in our grid view. So we're going to take this grid view and the H1 tag, copy it or cut it, put it in here. And it's ugly, so I'm going to Control A for all. Right-click and format selection. Right, so we're going to kind of hide this stuff here. We still need to separate the columns, though, and this is where we're going to put in our bound fields. So if I press in the left-hand side, right, or this angle bracket, I'm going to put ASP bound field, and you can also type it like this. You just this might help you as well. ASP bound field. I'll show you why the difference is. If you press Tab, right, sometimes it'll sort that out as well. In this case, it does not. It doesn't have code hinting for that. But what you want is run at server for sure. Right. So now you can add it in or not. It's up to you. For a bound field, actually, the main requirements are, because it's already kind of a bound field. It's already you need data field. You need to describe what your data field is. So my data field in this particular case is student ID. It needs to match what you have in the model. Right now, it doesn't have. It's not case sensitive because it's Microsoft. So because they use VB, student ID can be uppercase, lowercase, still going to work, right? Also, you also have to have something called, for the actual bound field, a header text, right? Remember the header text was ugly. It just kind of smashed everything together, right? So we can separate them. So you can say something like, well, you know what? This is student ID. That's important too, right? So we have header text. Then we can also decide if the field, if that particular column is visible or not. And by default, it is. But I want to put it explicit there, so that way say table dash bordered table dash, we'll say striped table dash hover, right? And I'm sure you can, there's other things you can put in here as well. Let me just do a couple of things here, just so that way it's not so ugly. I'm going to put some of this on the bottom, like this. Doesn't matter for our grid. We're going to add to our grid view anyway and add more things. I'm just making it so it's more visible for you. All right, cool. So we've added in some CSS classes. We've added in some CSS classes up here. Let's see what we actually have now. Control F5 to see what our little grid view looks like now, right, with a few modifications. Yeah, that's a little better. Notice that if I hover over, I get the hover effect going on. I do have my student IDs in a row. They all start with 30,000 or whatever, 300,000. And you know, it says student list here, and we can add in the rest of our columns. Let's do that. Let's add the rest of our columns in here, right? It looks nice. It's nicely centered, and everything's beautiful, right? So this is the next column. I'm just going to copy and paste here. So I'm going to take the next one, copy it, and paste it. So I'm going to copy a few bound fields. So instead of student ID here, obviously it's going to be called last name. That's the field. And this one is going to be called first mid name. First mid name. Remember, that's from the actual field. And this one is enrollment date. Enrollment date, right? Now, my header text is going to be somewhat similar. So I got to say something like last name. So it looks nice. And this one would be first name. We don't care about the mid. And this one would be enrollment date. Enrollment date. There we go. And then now there's a little bit different things happening for my enrollment date. It was pretty ugly before. What I wanted to do is do a little bit of things that doesn't make any sense, by the way. There's no intuitiveness behind this one. It's called data, right? Data format string. And what you need to do is put it inside these curly braces, go 0 colon, This is the syntax. And what you want to do here is you want to format this month, 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 day, day, you know, year, year, whatever. I'm gonna choose this one, month, 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 space, day, day, and then year, year, year. Right? So that I have a full year. Now you can try different formats, whatever you like. And there's a specification for a date format string up in the API for the grid view. All right, so right now we've got our date, we have our student ID, our last name, our first, mid name, and our enrollment date. They have to all match. If these don't match, it won't work. All right, let's save this thing, and let's see what we got now. So we're going to go back to our thing here, our website, and let's refresh. And you can see now that there's going to be all the fields coming up, and they look much nicer than before. You can actually see the names, they're separated, they're formatted nicely, they have a nice header. You can actually change the header CSS as well for each of these things, and so on. Cool, I like it. Next. Well, this is nice. So we've done the reading, we've done the R of CRUD, right? We've done the reading. I want to create, or I want to add a new student. How do I do that? Well, I need a couple things. One, I need some kind of link to take us to the student details page, which is what we're going to create. And I need the student details page itself, and the student details page has to have some kind of data in order for me to do that, like almost like a little form, right? But for now, I think we've created our student list, and it's a great place to upload to GitHub. So I'm going to go here, and I'm going to go to my Team Explorer, and I'm going to go home, and I'm going to go changes, and you can see that all the changes. I've changed my site master and my student and my students. I've added my students page or changed my student page. So I'll say added grid view to students page and connected connected to DB. There we go. Commit all, home, sync, push. And yay, it's pushed out to you know, GitHub, so we have everything online. Good. By the way, at the end, we're going to put this all up on Azure too. I hadn't had a chance to do that today at all. Right? Not because I don't want to, but because like literally it was like I was like fighting with the tools all day long. Right? Okay, so this is cool. We've got this piece done. Let's add the next piece. Remember, I want some kind of link. This is a great opportunity for us to add a button, right? So it's going to be underneath the H1 tag here. I'm going to add a new button that it's going to be an anchor tag, right? And the new link is going to be students details.aspx. That's the link. And we're going to use a class to define the button. So we're going to say a class of button dash success, so green button, right, with a little bit smaller than normal, so a small button. I also want to type in what it's going to say, right here inside my anchor tag. I want to say, with the space, add student. That's what it's going to do, right? So we're going to add a student. And in here, I'm going to use an I tag, so for some kind of icon, right? So an I tag. And in my I tag, I want to have a class of FA dash plus. There's going to be a little plus button. Okay, cool. So we got our button. Let's test it. So Control F5 to see the differences. We should see a little green button come up. There it is. Nice and nice, right? And now when I can't do it yet, but when I click on this, it's going to take me to my student details page, right? So let's make that page, right? Okay. So we'll go back to Visual Studio, go to Solution Explorer. I'm going to pin this up. I'm going to right-click here, and I'm going to add a new web form with master page. Are we good? Everyone else still good? Web form with master page. I'm going to call this student details. I guess they are good. All right, we're going to base it off our site master again, and we've got a blank page. I don't need this piece. The head content placeholder we can get rid of. But in here, inside the body, what we're going to do is define, you know, I know what I want to do. I know what my master page or what my students details page is going to do. I want to make a form, right? And when I make a form, I might as well put all the bootstrap classes in from the beginning, right? Before I do anything else. So let's do this thing. So I want to do something like this. Div with a class of container, right? And then div with the class of row, and then div with the class of, same thing we did last time, column dash medium dash offset. But instead of 2, we'll use 3. And then column dash medium dash 6. So 6 and 3 as opposed to 8 and 2, like we did last time from a ratio perspective. Inside there, we also want to put an H1 tag with some kind of thing that says student details, right? And then press tab. That's enough for now. So that's kind of where we're going to put it, student details. Below student details, Rich had a really good idea of putting in an H5 tag that says something like all fields are required, right? So that way, you know that every field you have to put in there is required if you want to enter it in. That's for now. Let's add a kind of a line break just for now, just to give it some space. We don't need to do that later on. And now this is where all of our form fields are going to go down in here. Right now, instead of me typing them out or going up online to get Bootstrap, remember I have that Bootstrap snippet pack, and I can do something like this: bs-form-group. Press tab, I get this. This gives me some of the stuff I need, but I need to change my input to an ASP text box, right? So I don't need some of this stuff. Like for example, I don't need this text type. And CSS class is what this is going to be. So this is going to be CSS class. So CSS class, right? And my on my form, this thing here is going to change to last name text box, right? Because we're going to form our, last name text box. I was right. Last name text box. Press enter. Which is going to change our ID here. We're going to make this ID capitalized to keep with the style, although it doesn't really matter. And our placeholder can't be my, my label. It's going to have to be like last name. And also notice that it's still giving me an error because I'm missing a run at server. And also I need a closing tag. So I need a closing tag for my ASP text box. There it is. So again, run at server, it's a form control, last name text box, placeholder last name, and you know what? The other thing is it's required. Okay, required is equal to true. I mean, this is the basis for how we do all of our forms, our form elements, right? This is our form group. You can also call it an asset, a set, right? We don't want to do that. We want to kind of copy and paste this. So we'll copy this whole thing and then paste it a couple times. So 1, 2, right? And instead of last name text box, we want to call this first name text box. Okay, and this will be, see my label I kept the same for some reason. I don't know why. Last name. This will be first name. That actually. First name, capitals. And I want to take first name text box and put it inside my ID. There we go. And this would be first name instead of last name. And then I'll do the same thing for this one, but this one's a little different, this one here. We'll talk about that. This one is, instead of first name text box, it is enrollment date text box. It's really very long, enrollment date text box. It's very contextual though. Copy, and we want to put it inside my ID, right? And this is all dandy. We can also put enrollment date in here. Enrollment date. Instead of my placeholder, it would be enrollment date. We might want to put other information here, like the format we're looking for, enrollment date, right? One thing, though, I know for sure is that the date is a date type, right? So we can try and put in our text mode as a date, right? So we can kind of I'll put it in here. So I'll say text mode, right, is equal to date, right? Because that's the kind of data we want. Easier for us to enter in. So far we have 3 form groups, right? Last name, first name. This is matching up with our class for our student, right? Last name, first name, and enrollment date. Those 3 things. Okay, now we need buttons, and I'm going to create 2 of them, just like we did last time. So div dot text right is what I'm going to use as a class, and inside my buttons, I'm going to have 2 buttons. I'm going to make an ASP button, and my text for my first one is going to be called cancel, right? We did this last week, but we had a bit of a problem. We took it away, but we're going to fix this one today. Our ID is going to be the cancel button. You know what it is? That's important. Our CSS class is going to be a button warning, button large, right? That's what it's going to be. Button warning, button large, right? As an example. Now, there's also a couple of classes I like to use with my cancel button, because remember last time we can't do cancel button because it would validate the form, right? We can get away with that by, and I found this out, is by using use submit behavior is equal to false. That's like saying prevent default, right, with JavaScript. Let me just put this under here for a second. And also, the other thing we can do is we also don't want to causes validation. We want to make that false too. So we don't want it to cause any kind of validation at all. Right? So our cancel button literally would just cancel the request to make a new and submit a new student. That's what it's going to do. All right. Let's copy this and put it in as our save button. That's the next one we're going to make. All right. So save button. So instead of text is cancel, this is going to be text is save. Instead of button 1, it's going to be called save button, right? And then instead of button warning, we're going to say button primary. This is the blue button, right? Run at server. We do want to submit behavior. So when we click the save button, we do want to submit, and we do want to cause validation. So we got to take these out because the default is true. Here we go. So 2 buttons, 3 forms, 3 form elements. And you know what? The buttons need some click events. Let's do that. So I'll say on click. And we're going to say create new event. It's going to be based on the name of the button. So this is my cancel button click. And we're going to do the same thing for my other event. So we'll say on click. We're going to say create new event. And this is going to be the save button click. Now when we do that and save this, and we notice that this has already been, the code behind file is there. And I can go back there and I can edit the events. So one thing, let's take care of the cancel button right away. Our cancel button, when we click the cancel button, it's going to take us back to the students.aspx page. Right, cancel. That's all it's going to do. Just response redirect. Response.redirect. It's going to go back to, we use the tilde for absolute positioning, students.aspx. Cool. That's all it does. So we're going to redirect people. So with the, we're going to put a short form here. We'll make this better later. Actually, we'll leave it. We'll put this over here. Redirect back to students page. So this does. And then from a save button perspective, this is where all the fun happens. Our save button actually is going to do all the work, right? When I click the save button, it's going to access the database. It's going to do all the same stuff. And if I want to do access to the beta, guess what I need up here? I need the same using statements up here. So, you know, so using statements required for EFDB access. What are they? Using? What are they? Okay, that's the second one. But the first one is my project dot models. I need to access that. And the other one is using system dot web dot model binding. Those two. If I don't have those two, can't do EF stuff, right? All right. Now what? Well, everything is inside the save button, like I said. That's all the fun right here, my save button. So let's do the save button stuff first. So we want to use EF, Entity Framework, to connect to the server, right? That's what we want to do again. So let's do that first. So we'll say using, and then in brackets, again, default connection. We'll do that. We'll set up another default connection, right? DB is equal to new default connection. Here's something I want to ask you guys. Do you think there's an opportunity for me to create some other kind of way of doing this? I don't have to repeat myself over and over again. Right? Think about it. Then what I want to do is I want to use the student model this time around to create a new student object, and also record or save a new record. We're going to do. All right, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to use a new student model to create a new student object, right? Now the student model, I should actually put in there, it's a capital S. It's a student model. Remember, the student model is just a class that exists where? In my Solution Explorer under Models. And if you notice, if I look at the, this is my context. If I look at the model, I can see that there's a student. Student is a class. Student can produce an object, right? And the way we do that, of course, just like we normally would, we would say student. It's the data type, right? New student, we'll call it, is equal to new student. I'll move that up so you can see it. So again, first we create a connection. Remember, with this almost like connect with references. That's what this is, to the data, to the database. The default connection is really a default context, and we're using this DB variable to stand for the database itself. It is a reference to the database and all of its tables. Okay? Now, the next piece. I want to say something like this, right? I want to go new student then, right? New student. I want to build up my new student, right? That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to kind of, here's what I want, just like we did with Mongo when we were doing things with COMP2008. What I want is I have my new student object and I want to add stuff into it. So I want to complete my student object like it would normally be in the database, as if it was a whole record, right? So add data to the new student record. That's what we're going to do here. And we're going to say something like this. New student dot last name is equal to what? Last name text box dot text. That's all it is. Right? And then we're going to say new student dot first mid name is equal to first name text box dot text. And then new student dot enrollment date is equal to enrollment date text box dot text. But we have a problem because this requires a date time. So therefore, we have to do a conversion. We'll say convert to date time, and we'll kind of pull this into this. So we convert our text string into a date. Okay, this completes the student record. We have our object. It's sitting in space. We haven't used it yet. All we've done is we've created it, instantiated an object, and put stuff into it as a container. That's all we've done. Now we've got to save this object into the database. And the way, of course, the way to do that is to use link, right? So use link, right? And ADO.NET, that's what we're going to use, ADO.NET, to add or insert my new student into the database. The way we do that, of course, we're going to say this. We're going to say DB, that's our database reference, dot students, the students table, dot add. Remember, add is a part of a collection. Look at the other stuff we can do. Add range, all. These are all the same objects and methods we can use when we use lists, right? Pretty much. Find, group by. We can do all kinds of stuff. Join, and a bunch of other stuff. Remove, that's for deletion, right? And so we say add. And in there, what we're going to pass in there? New student. That's our fully qualified object right? That's of type student. So it passes the new student into the database as a new record, right? Now, in order for us to finish and do it properly, we have to save our changes, right? Which of course is db.savechanges. Right, so we've saved our changes to the database, and our database is fully updated at this point. I mean, really, this is much easier in effect than anything we did with Node. Like, it's very straightforward, makes sense, right? If I go here now, after this, we want to redirect to or back to the updated students page. What we want to do here, and we'll say something like response, right, dot redirect, and we'll put our fully qualified name again with a tilde and students ASPX. All right, that's it. That should do it, right? So what this does again is we make a connection just like we did last time, very similar to what we did last time. We create a student object from here, right? And then we populate it with data from our form. This is all the form data. So add form data, that's what this is, form data to the new student record. And after we add the form data, then we use link to add. This is this add method. The add method actually does the adding, and then we save changes to finish things off. That's all it does. Okay, let's test it to see if it works, right? So now, in order for us to test this, we have to build our project. So we say build solution, because otherwise we won't, our solution won't be linked together, right? Once the solution succeeds, then what I want to do for the first time, we haven't done this too much, is I want to run this with debugging. I want to see how this works, right? So here we are. We have our database connection. We're going to get our form input. Here's our student, yay. And I want to add another one down here, right? Let's add one, add a student. And you know what? I want to save my student. Oh, man. Okay, so this works. It doesn't let me do that. How about this? Can I cancel? Hey, what happened here? Look at how come it's like way over here. That's crazy. This shouldn't be this long. I made a mistake. Darn it. See, this is the testing we have to do, right? Otherwise, we wouldn't know. That's bad, right? So we'll come back to that. Let's fix it now. I don't want to, you know what? When we see an error, we want to fix it. Even though it's a small error, I don't care. So, all right, hold on a second. This is my students here. This is okay. Student details is here. Oh, yeah. Right, so that's our problem, right? So we need to fix that. I wonder why we didn't catch that. And that's weird that it expanded that way too. Did I put a dot? Okay. All right, let's try this again. So I'm gonna run it again with full debugging again. It's gonna take us to the page, and it should give us the right size now, right? Okay, cool, this is the right size. I click save, okay, I got problems. If I put a name in here and I click save, I got this one as a problem. And it'll keep going down the line, that's good. How about if I click cancel? Will it do some validation? Well, no, sir, it does not. It goes back to the students page, which is good. So that works. Let's go to add student again. Let's put in some student information. So my last name and Tom, and then the date. And I can go in here. I don't know, let's choose a future date. So it's not right now. I want to choose, instead of June, let's choose September. This is kind of a neat little date picker that's only available in Chrome. So we have to figure that out. That might not work exactly like we want it. So let's say, I don't know, the 6th of September is when school starts. And I want to click save. Let's try this out. So when I click save, it goes to the database, and here I am. Okay, nice and easy. So the database is added in there. I've got my new student ID and everything. So to recap, all right, we did the first 2 letters of CRUD. So create and read. First, we read the student list in a data grid view, and then we created a new record to add into the database, right? That's the 2 things we've done today. Plus, we've created our framework for the entire lab. So I've done 1/2 of CRUD. Next week, when we get back, we already have our application, right? I'm going to add to it with you, finish off CRUD for students, and your job I'm going to give you the details, is going to be finishing off courses and departments. Okay, that's what I want you to do. I may make it a lab for 2. Okay, just so that way, because we have a lot of stuff, other stuff going on, to make it so it's a little easier for you guys to do together, right? Because you're going to be starting to work with your partners after this, and I want to make it so that's nice and easy so we can get it done. It's not going to be burdening you, but it's going to give you enough information to get it all done. Okay, like pair programming again. Okay, we need to do one last thing before we stop for today. Actually, a couple things I want to go into. We're way ahead of all the other classes compared to what we, in terms of performance. Everything worked nicely. I think you guys are the, I don't know, the easygoing class. I don't know what you want to call it. For everything, for data, for stuff, questions, you know, things working. There's only a couple of people that had problems. The other classes had all kinds of problems. So let's do a couple of things. One, let's deploy this puppy to Azure and see what happens. I want to do that because if, you know, we did all this work and all of a sudden it dies, right? That's bad, right? So let's try this out. This is the first. So this is the first run. So I don't know if it's going to work even, right? Let's close this down. Stop this, right? We need to create populate Azure in here. So I'm going to create a new inside the Azure portal. I'm going to go new, and I'm going to create a new web and mobile app. Here's my web app. Inside here, I want to make a new app. We're going to call this, again, the same thing I always call it. You're going to call it Lab 3, I recommend, so to make it easier for you guys. So I'm going to say COMP2007, summer 2016, lesson 4, right? Yay, no one took it. And what I want to do is use existing. I want to use the, Canada East or Georgian, whatever one I want to use, something that's already there, right? And I want to click Pin to Dashboard and Create. So it's going to give me my space again. This is all stuff we've done many times before. Nothing interesting here. But one thing is that I want to test it because now we have a data connection, and this is where we have to, I want to make sure that there's no problems with the data connection, right? Because otherwise, what's all this work we've done? To make a local database here or something that runs only on our local machines but not remote, that would be bad, right? So let's check this out and wait for this Azure stuff to finish. And that's going to happen over here, right? Because this is where it's deploying. Eventually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and kill some of these earlier projects, right? So that way we can clear some of this up, right? But for now, I have a new version of an extension is available. Woohoo! Okay. Let's look at this. So this is my web app as an example. And what I want to do with my web app here is like we did before. I want to go down to publishing. I want to go to deployment source. I want to click on what kind of deployment source. It's going to be GitHub. And then from GitHub, which one is it? I'm going to use, of course, Georgian. And then my project, which one is it? It's going to be this one, 4C. This is the last one I did today. And then click OK. Now this is the test. It's going to go out to GitHub. Grab everything, create all the connection strings for if this works while I, wait for this to deploy. Look, this is even taking a sweet time updating, which also worries me. Right? I'm not sure if it worked the same for you, but for me, I'm not even getting a deployment target at anything like right now. So I'm going to take my time and wait for it to happen. I like to wait with Azure, right? Because there's no point publishing or pushing until I get this stuff working, right? If I want to be sure, I can always, oh, it says successful deployment, but I want to see what this means. I want to click on my deployment source here. And I want to see that there's a check mark. This is good. And I want to click on this now and see if it works. Crossing fingers. 1, 2. And come on, baby. I got to say something here, right? Because if this doesn't work, I'd be very upset. So far, it's OK. Let's test it with the students page. This is where the data comes into play. This is an important page because if it doesn't work here, none of us will matter. Yay, beautiful. So it works here on the students page, nice and live. I can, oh, wait, where's the link? The button is gone, right? Oh, yeah. Maybe I didn't. Let's push it. I didn't push it. That would be bad, right? So let's push the, go to Team Explorer. Woohoo! Oh, okay. I'm going to go home and go to changes. And yeah, I added a student's detail page, added student details page. As an example, commit all, go home, and then go to sync and push. All right, so it's going to push up everything to, whoa, that was weird. It's going to push up everything here, and it says failed to push remote repository. See the output window for more details. Whoa, that was weird. Okay. I don't know why, but we're going to try it again. And because, yes, now it worked. I don't know why it happened, but we've been having all kinds of lovely things happening today. Okay, this is cool. So let's watch the deployment window change. Yay, it's deploying. Let's see what's happening. So the pending changes are in play. I want to be able to check this stuff out and I want to add something live. We should see the same persistent data. I should see my name up there because I added it to the database, and it's accessing the same database that we were doing remotely, right? So we should see the exact same changes to the database remote, right? So see where that happens. Okay, this is good. So we've got a check mark again. That's a good thing, good sign. Click on this, right? We're going to deploy the link again and get rid of this one. And what it's going to do is going to go do its dance. It's going to regenerate the page for a second for the first time, right? And then hopefully we'll get our links and everything working, right? There we are. This is good. Students. Let's get our link. Yes, good. The add student button. And then we'll add another one. We'll say Smith, last name John Smith, and we'll add in an enrollment date here, right? Of I don't know, today. Let's do this today's date. Click save. So when we do that, it goes in, and now we have John Smith at the bottom. Here's the problem with this, and we're going to deal with this later on. If I check this out here, this thing here, if I go home, and if I run this in another browser, and this is something we have to worry about now because it's a little different. For example, I want to run it in Firefox. Firefox is a very, very popular browser. So it's not like it's like behind the times or anything. So I'm going to run it here and paste and go and see what happens. And you're going to see that it's very similar. Here's Firefox. If I go to students, you can see that it comes up. I see everything in students. But when I click add student, you can see now I don't get my date picker at all, right? In fact, there's no data whatsoever. This could cause a huge issue with me. If I try and save this to the database, which it would, right? My problem will be that it'll crap the database out, right? We want to do some data validation here. And by the way, your first project that we're doing is a lot about data validation because you're going to change values. You're going to have control to do stuff. We're going to talk about that before we go. We need to control this stuff. So what do I need here? A validator control, right? I need to add that in right now. I have some time to add it in now because it's only 7:30, right? And guys, by this point and throughout the day, I have never been able to deploy to Azure. I've been rushing to the last minute to get all the stuff down for the first 2 letters of CRUD, right? That's all I could do. And even that, I did poorly. Like, it just didn't work today. It was like the world was against me. But anyways, just maybe I'm just sick. So let's take a look at this. How do I fix this problem? I need to add in a data validator control. Now we want to add it in. We want to make it so that it makes sense. I'm still not 100% happy with the way the data validation controls look. I'm not happy with it, and I'm going to continue to look for different solutions to make them look a little nicer, because I think it's a problem, right? I really do. So here's student details, and I want to add in a data validator control. Now remember, in order for me to add my data validation control, I've already done the pre-work for you. Why? Because we have a contact form, and my contact form already has data validation controls built in, okay? We're going to modify this contact form, by the way, because we're going to change our cancel button. Now we have the same look and feel. Notice that our students, when I click the add student button, we still have the same look and feel as we have in our contact button. Same look and feel. You want to keep whatever it is, whatever form or function or whatever you want, make sure the buttons all make sense, right? Or have the same kind of way of doing them. So we want to add in some kind of validator control. And this time we're going to make a range validator. so that it can work in Firefox, right? So that it stops us when we put the wrong kind of data inside this form, and it stops us from doing that. Also, you know what? We could put other validators in here. Like if I click Save now, it says, please fill out this field. Like that's the way Firefox does it. And for Edge, it does it even worse. Like it doesn't look very good, right? So not to say that Edge isn't good. Like let's test it in Edge here. So here I'm on the Microsoft side, and what I want to do is I want to browse with, right? I want to choose Edge. Here's Edge, and then click Browse. It's going to, you know, kick up Edge for a second, and now if you see, look, it has this enrollment thing, but it's kind of weird, right? It's a totally different kind of little rolly here that we have. So I can do something like September, you know, 29th, you know, 2013 as an example, and you know, kind of click away, and still nothing, right? If I click it again, notice that there's two buttons down here. There's a checkbox and an X, right? I didn't notice that the first time. September, you know, I don't know, 6, 2016, and then check. Okay, now, ooh, that's kind of a weird way of putting it in, right? And it kind of does that for Edge, right? If I click Save, you can see that it highlights the field in red, and it says this is a required field, but not this one. I don't know why, right? So it's kind of, you know, weird what Edge does. So again, it's interesting to note how different browsers treat our application, right? All right, so let's fix this one field. We'll put one data validation control in here, and then we'll talk about our project number 1 and what you need to do for next week. Okay. So again, I'm going to get this data validation field right out of the box from the toolbox. You can see that there is a validation control called range validator. That's the one we want to use, and we want to put it right underneath, right, the form group, or inside the form group that has my my enrollment date, right? So that's where I want to put it. So I'm going to put my toolbox up, clip it on, and drag and drop my range validator right in here. All right, there it is. Okay, let's just undo that for a second, and so we can see the whole range validator. It's called range validator 1. That's fine. Error message can't be range validator. There's going to be a lot of stuff we have to put in here. So the error message has to be something like invalidate. Here's the format. So invalidate, right? That kind of thing. Invalidate, and then format is what? It's got to be something like what I'm asking for, which is, you know, month, day, year, at the very minimum, right? That's what I want. Month, day, year, right? So that's one of the things we can put in there. We also need to know which control we're validating, right? For our range validators. We can put in the, you know, control to validate, which is what we've put in there, right? Control to validate. And we're going to choose, of course, the enrollment date text box. That's the one we're validating. Just copy and paste that one. I'm not going to bother typing that in. And then that's another one we need, right? Enrollment date. And then we also need a min value and a max value. And Rich suggested that, you know, we did this last time. So the min value, it's got to be in the form of a date. So it's got to be something like this: 01, you know, 01. Let's say for this millennium, we can't have students earlier than 2000, let's say. And then for this millennium, you know, for the maximum date, I like that idea. Maximum date or maximum value is equal to, you know, 01, you know, 2999. This era, if you will. You know, this is the way. So it's kind of a big date range, but it doesn't allow negative values and stuff like that. So it's a really big range. The other type is we also want to talk about the type. All right, the type. So we have our different types, and one of the type we want to use is date. That's the date type. So we're going to make another space. Like it's taking a lot of, like, date, any validator takes a lot of space, right? So type, right, is equal to, and it's going to be, of course, date. So it's going to be a date type validation. The other thing I want to talk about is display. You know, I want to make it dynamic. Remember I talked about dynamic and static. I don't want to make it static so it takes up too much space. So it almost kind of populates there. And you know what? Let's not use CSS, the alert. It doesn't look good. I have to really format it with proper CSS. I want to work on that with you before I fix this. So for now, what I want to try and do is an alternative, and then we'll find the way to do this properly is like something like back color. I'll make that red, and we'll do a 4-color for the thing. We'll make this white, kind of a white 4-color. And then what we'll also do is, let's change the font size really quickly here so it's a little bit larger. Let's say large. I don't like doing this. This is just a workaround for now. And then we'll find a way of making this nicer later. So you've got a little validator, and this is enough to kind of stop things from happening. It will prevent me from entering a false date, right? Or something that doesn't work in the future, right? So let's try this out and then see if this works. So first I'll try it locally. With Chrome, I mean, it won't make a difference. I can test with Chrome all I want, and Chrome is going to be beautiful, right? Because it's got the, the HTML5 and JavaScript controls built in, so, it won't care, right? It won't care if this works, right? So, for example, if I put in a date, if I say something like, my last name, let's put another one actually instead of me. Let's put in Smythe, right? St. John Smythe, St. John Smythe, right? And if we go into the date, we pick a date. So we pick a date like in the future sometime. So far, so good. But if I change this date, right, to something weird, like put 0, and the type I've kind of stick away, then I get, hey, invalid date format is blah, 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 right? So that kind of comes up. And if I adhere to what it's saying, if I put in a date format like that, so I say, I don't know, 69, right? That won't work, right? So I got to kind of watch what I'm asking here to do. It should be year, 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 right? That's definitely what I want to put in there. So that needs to change. If I fix this thing by choosing the proper date, so the proper year, so if I say something like, 2165, which is a valid date, that would be okay. We'd accept it and we can move on, right? Let's pick a date that is not in another century. So let's pick it like, so it's like 2018, so the future, but it's the near future. And then click Save. So it kind of saves St. John Smythe inside the database. There it is. There he is in there, right? And you can see all the dates and everything else. We can continue add students like that, no problem. All right, now let's try it in Firefox. We have to attempt it in Firefox, right? So Chrome is working. We're going to stop this, and we're going to browse. We're going to browse with Firefox. So here's browse with Firefox. Press browse. And again, I'm using the Firefox that's built into on the Windows side. And notice that we have an enrollment date now. If I type in another name, Parker, Peter, as an example, and then I type in a weird date, I have to type it in that format now. And it doesn't tell me anything. And maybe that kind of prompts me to want to try and put in a date format right here to kind of tell people what I want, right? Because it's not really telling me what I want. So I'm going to try and type in something. It just says fill out the field. So I'm going to say something like, 01, 09, and then 2001. And if I press tab, I'm okay, right? That kind of cool. But if I put something else in there, instead of 2001, I put 0000, and I click tab away, it gives me invalid date format. So that works for me, right? Let's cancel that and fix this ugly thing. It's going to redirect back to here, and without Peter Parker being added in, which is important. And let's go back. So it's almost good, but I think we need to change our error message. So it doesn't say invalid date format, blah, blah, blah. We want the format to be year, year, year. And from a testing perspective, we found out that enrollment date text box needs to have a better placeholder. So we want to say enrollment date, and then we'll say format. We put in there, format is month, month, day, day, year, year, year. Right? So that we tell everybody what we're looking for inside the placeholder. Or you can always put in something like date format instead of enrollment date format, because this looks pretty long. Let's see if it even fits. All right, so we're going to kind of browse it in Chrome first, right? So we're going to run it in Chrome, Control F5. And now we can see that, again, this is just like details. But see here in Chrome, I got nothing, right? Because I've got a calendar control that comes up with the date type, right? But in Firefox, right? So if I browse it in Firefox here, right, which is important for us to try different browsers again, right? Then you can see that I get enrollment date format, blah, blah, blah. This is good. This is better than what it was before, right? And the same thing goes with IE. If I did it with Edge, this is what Edge looks like. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Don't switch my stuff to Edge. I meant browse with Edge. I don't want my default being Edge. Okay, and then browse, and then see how it goes. This looks okay. I get this still because it has this funny, weird spinner that it's trying to give us, right? That's fine. So this is okay. Let's try it with IE, which is the other big browser, right? Still around, unfortunately. Let's go into Internet Explorer. So we're going to browse with Internet Explorer, and then browse. And then we're going to check that one too. All right. Whoa. Yeah. No. Homepage. Stop websites. My settings. Done. Yeah. Yeah. Let's try this again. So we'll refresh, and we can see that. Look, we've got this thing in here, and I have the same kind of controls as Firefox, right? So again, if I click save, I'm going to get all these popping up as required fields. If I click cancel, it should take us back to the students list and everything else. We still have our persistent toolbar on the bottom. Everything is working fine. Let's just unclick that because I don't know what that's going to do. And it's funny, that's one thing. It connects me to connect me to Skype, which is interesting. I got a Skype link that's built into my Internet Explorer. It tells you how long it's been since I used it. I don't use Skype anymore. But anyways, that's kind of it in a nutshell for this. I think we've done enough for today. I'm going to go into my Team Explorer here, and I'm going to upload this to GitHub. So I'm going to go to Changes. I'm going to say to Added Range Validator for enrollment date to student details page. Press Commit All, go home, and then click Sync. And now we'll have that piece as well. Okay, cool. So we've done this piece. I want to talk about, just really briefly, the assignment. I want to update this later tonight when I get home. So sometime later tonight, you'll see it come in. I've been working on it with Rich. Again, we've kind of modified it from before, and it's going to really look like this. Starting off from a project perspective, it's going to be called the Game Tracker. All right, Game Tracker. This is worth 20% of your final mark, so it's the main thing. It's going to be between you and a partner. You're going to be doing pair programming here to create this, much larger application with web forms. This is going to be your I don't know, the project. You're going to have 2 projects this semester, one in the first half and one in the second half with MVC. This is the first half. So the first part due next week on the Wednesday will include the following. The first draft of your external document, right? Your initial project setup, structure, and setup, which means some kind of template that runs into GitHub, and it's up on Visual Studio, and you've done your 5%. So give me your external document with your wireframes. All right, I need wireframes. I want you to draw out what your little game tracker is going to look like, because everyone's game tracker can look different. I'm not going to tell you what to do. Your game tracker could be in columns, 4 games, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 columns. Each one has a different kinds of games. Maybe tennis, soccer, hockey, something else, basketball, right? And then each game will have 2 teams, right? So team A and team B, whatever they're called. I want to know what they scored, what they allowed in. There's no ties allowed in this thing. So one team has to win, right? And then how many spectators were in the team, were watching the game, right? Who won, who lost, all that kind of stuff. And for those 4 teams, when you look at the main game tracking page, that is for that week. If you click on next week, you can go to the next team, right? Or the next week of the next 4 teams, or whatever they're going to be, 4 groups of teams. Every time you click next week or submit, the changes, it gets saved into a database, right? So you're going to keep track of each of the teams, all their scores, how many spectators. So eventually we can do things like data analysis if you really want to. Okay, I'm not going to ask for data analysis. All I want you to do is save it up to the, to the database, and we're going to get some simple reporting. All right, so how many teams lost and won, who are the top teams, those kind of things. So it's due, the first part, 5%, is just the plan. So concept, I want you to sit with your partner, whoever they are, draft out a first draft of your external document, right? And the external document's got to have some requirements that I'm going to list below. Part 2 is going to be due a week later, right? It's going to require your main game tracking page and your database setup and partial functionality, which means that I only want you to track of one team per week. Can you keep track of one team, like one column or one? Maybe you want to do it in swim lanes. You want to do it this way, across the page. It's supposed to up and down. I want you also to think about how would this look on a mobile device if I wanted to track more than one team. Like, you don't have to do it massive. You can make it so that it works on a mobile device, right? So I want you to draft it out. Think of what it looks like. Wireframe it up. Draw it out. See how it's gonna work for you guys. Add buttons. Put some stuff that's non-ASP.NET. Things like with HTML and Bootstrap or other CSS classes to make it look nice, right? This is an opportunity for you and your partner to shine and to come up with a nice little project that you can add to your portfolio, right? Third week, this is the last, this is due week 7, the same week that you're doing your exam, right? You're gonna have full functionality and site security, right? So you'll be able to do things like this. Person logs in, they have some admin pages, they know users, some very simple things, some dashboards we're gonna talk about. Full functionality, all 4 games being tracked each week, and the final version of your external document and any finishing touches. All right, that's all going to be due week 7. That's Wednesday, June the 22nd of 2016 at midnight. So again, 20% of your final mark. This is truly a project, and again, there's each one will work in pairs. I'm going to continue to add to this, but basically the idea is you'll build an ASP.NET Web Forms application that will track 4 different games or contests for each calendar week, right? So when you go to the next week, it's the next calendar week. Make sure that you keep track of each calendar week. So dates are important. So it's like from Sunday to Saturday or something like that, whatever your calendar week is. You can choose what that is. Maybe it's Monday to Sunday. You choose what that week looks like for yourself, right? And then your main game tracking page will display the weekly statistics of each game. Each game will track 2 teams, and your web application will record which team won the game, which team lost, obviously. And your web app will also measure how many points were scored and how many points were allowed or lost for each team, and how many spectators watched each game. Those are the 3 things that it's going to track. You must ensure that you deploy appropriate user input validation throughout your web application, because there's lots of places you can add in stuff. You're going to be the one, the user who's logged in can go in there and modify the values, whatever he wants or she wants, right? So you have to make sure that it's rock solid. So I can't break it. I can't go in there and add an X where you need an integer, and it's going to break your form. I don't want that to happen, right? I want you to both do front-side validation and server-side validation as well. So it can't just be HTML5 and JavaScript. It's not enough, because remember, we can turn all that stuff off. I want it to be client-side and server-side validation. The weekly results will be recorded in a database using appropriate tables and relations. So if I want to, if I click submit, my submit button, that whole weekly result for that whole calendar week is saved in a database, and I can retrieve it at any time. If I don't have something in the database for that particular week, it's empty. Comes up empty, right? But I should be able to look at each week and any game that's been played for that particular week I can track. My recommendation to you is track some real games. Pick a few games to make it realistic, and sit there and say, okay, I want to pick these 2 games. Like, for example, I want to track basketball, baseball, football seasons of coming up. With everything else that's happening right now, baseball is going to around the corner. Really, at the end of the day, it's like there's so much stuff going on right now. And other teams, maybe you like lacrosse, or maybe you like to watch running competitions or something like that, or maybe you like play Magic the Gathering, right? Whatever you want to do, you track whatever game or contest you want, and who watched and how many players and all that kind of stuff. It's up to you. All right. So that's really what this thing is in a nutshell. I will continue to work on this thing. This is not going to be worth like 60 points like it says, because I'll be honest with you, it's going to get very complex. Part of the core requirements are going to require things like internal documentation, like normal, user management and site security, web application structure. I'm just going to go through some. I got a template right now that I'm using. Internal documentation, external documentation. Share your files on GitHub, and there's going to be a bit of a. See, I'm using the old turning bracket site from last semester. And basically, what I'm doing is I'm putting together a little a rubric for you to have all the details of what everything is worth and when it's due. So questions around this one. I'm going to put up the shell for this thing again tonight. So you'll see the requirements for part 1 and when it's all due. It'll be up on Blackboard. Okay. Again, that's why it's a two-man show, or a woman and a man show, or a two-women show, because it's a double horsepower thing. Please don't try and tackle this on your own. This could turn into a 30-hour website. Okay, I don't want this to be that way. It's a project. It's over 3 weeks. This isn't something that I expect to happen tomorrow, which means it better be darn good, right? It's got to be something you can spend your time, make it nice, add some images. Don't just do text. Maybe you want to do some colors. There might be other things that you want to do, like things like maybe you want to track who won and who lost in points with levers and kind of levels or whatever. You can be as creative here or as dull as you want, right? So, try and be creative about this and plan it out. Okay, guys, that's it for me. I think I've talked my brains out with the 150 minutes of sleep that I got last night. I got to say it again. And I'll see you guys all next week. Remember, next week we have Lab 3. We've done one part of it. There's going to be another part that I got to finish, and there's 2 parts that you guys are going to finish. And chances are I'm going to give it to you in a pair again. All right? Thanks so much. See you next week.